Welcome to Revenge Mag. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and step into the stories that serve the quiet revenge.
My name is Harper Quinn. I'm 28 years old, and last Thanksgiving, my mom stood up in the middle of a luxury ski resort in Aspen, raised her champagne glass, and turned my whole life into a punchline. "I have two daughters," she announced, smiling at the room. "One is a famous lawyer, and the other is basically a beggar." The table exploded with laughter. Chairs creaked, glasses clinked. Someone actually snorted. I felt every eye slide over me, down my thrift store sweater to the worn sneakers I'd thrown on after a 12-hour shift. "Remember when she said she'd be some kind of star athlete?" Someone joked. "Be nice," another voice chimed in. "At least she knows how to sleep on the couch." "You're lucky we haven't kicked you out yet," my own father added, like it was the funniest thing he'd said all year. My nephew muttered something about wanting to crawl into the floor if he were me. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just wrapped my fingers around my grandmother's necklace, felt the cool metal against my skin, pushed my chair back, and walked out of that perfect postcard dining room without a word. Nobody followed. Nobody even called my name. 1 week later, my phone lit up at 6 a.m. "Mom, my card just got declined." 8:02 a.m. "Why are our investments crashing? Why didn't the funds go through?" 10:30 a.m. "The bank says our accounts are under review." 11:30 a.m. "Please don't do this." We know we were wrong. Where are you? If you want to know what happened in that 1 week between their laughter and their panic, stay with me until the end. When I got back to my tiny apartment in Denver that night, I dropped my suitcase by the door and just stood there in the dark, still hearing their laughter echoing in my head. My mom, Evelyn, calling me a beggar in front of a room full of relatives. My dad, Richard, doubling down like it was some kind of comedy roast. My older sister, Sophia, sitting there in her perfect blazer, the famous lawyer, not saying a single word to stop it. My brother Ethan smirking like always, like this was just another family joke I should be used to by now. The truth is, I am used to it. I grew up in a house where Sophia's trophies lived in their own glass cabinet, and my soccer medals got tossed in a shoe box in the garage. She was the one with the straight A's and the law school plan and the framed newspaper article on the fridge. Ethan was the kid everyone called a natural leader, the one Dad took to Home Depot and business seminars, the one who was going to run something big one day. Me, I was the kid who drew logos in the margins of my homework and begged for a cheap laptop so I could teach myself design and coding from YouTube. Every time I mentioned building an app, my parents would smile and say things like, "That's cute," or maybe keep a real job just in case. When I blew my knee in high school and my shot at a college soccer scholarship disappeared, the way they talk about it now, you'd think it was just another example of me quitting. They forget the surgery, the rehab, the nights I cried because my whole identity had shifted in a single bad landing. Over time, the comments got sharper at family dinners. Mom would say, "If you worked half as hard as Sophia, you'd be fine by now." Dad would shake his head and tell people, "Harper is still trying to figure herself out." Like I wasn't sitting right there. Ethan would joke about how many side hustles I'd tried, delivering groceries, walking dogs, freelance design. "She's allergic to stability," he'd say. Sophia would stay quiet, but silence is just a different way of agreeing. So when they laughed at me in Aspen, it wasn't new. It was just louder. It was public. It was the moment I finally realized that in their version of our family story, I was never going to be anything but the failure they pointed at to make themselves feel better. After I left the resort, I drove through the mountains in silence, fingers wrapped around my grandmother's necklace, feeling the small engraved edge press into my palm every time the car hit a bump. My grandma was the only person who ever looked at me and saw more than the weird artsy kid. She used to tell me, "You don't have to be the golden child to shine. You just have to stop standing where they cast their shadows." I didn't fully understand that until that night. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, pulled on a hoodie, and went out for a run in the cold Denver air. The sky was still almost black, street lights buzzing, my breath turning white as I ran. With every step, I replayed their words, not just from Aspen, but from years of being the punchline. The jokes about me being broke. The digs about, maybe next year you'll finally make some real money. The little comments that sound harmless if you only hear one, but start to crush you when you've heard them for a decade. I thought about how many times I had swallowed it. Told myself it was just family, that they didn't mean it, that I should be grateful they let me crash on their couch in LA for a while. Grateful for being treated like a stray they let inside when the weather was bad. Somewhere between mile 2 and mile 3, something snapped into place. Not anger exactly. It felt more like a switch flipping from "please love me" to "you don't get to talk about me like that anymore." I stopped on the sidewalk, hands on my knees, heart pounding, and I knew two things with total clarity. 1. I was done auditioning for a role in their perfect little success story. 2. I had been the one quietly keeping their lives from falling apart for years, and they had no idea. They had no idea about the nights I stayed up reworking payment schedules so their loans wouldn't default. They had no idea whose money was actually plugging the holes in their finances. They sat there in Aspen, calling me a beggar while living off safety nets I had built behind the scenes. I straightened up, thumb brushing over my necklace, and made a decision. I wasn't going to scream at them or show up at their door with bank statements. I was simply going to stop. Stop fixing, stop funding, stop being the invisible support beam in a house where I was treated like clutter. Let the numbers tell the truth they refused to hear from my mouth. Let them feel what life really looked like without the beggar they laughed at. Most people in my family think I deliver food and design pretty buttons for random apps when I can't sleep. That's the version of my life they're comfortable with because it fits their story about me being the messy, unstable one. The real version started 6 years ago in a cramped co-working space in downtown Denver with flickering lights and suspiciously noisy air vents. I was 22, fresh off a failed attempt to launch a fitness tracking app, sitting across from a guy named Caleb Hayes, who believed in my brain more than my own parents ever had. Caleb was the one who looked at my spaghetti-covered whiteboard of ideas and said, "You know, freelancers are terrible with money, right? What if you build something that thinks about it for them?" That was how LoopNest was born. An app that tracks income from different clients, predicts your tax, automates bill payments, and lets you set up rules like, if my account drops below this number, pause extra payments. I handled design and user flows, coded late at night, fixed bugs until my eyes burned. Caleb handled growth, partnerships, and calling scary financial people so I didn't have to. At first, we had like 10 users, friends of friends. A photographer, 2 Etsy shop owners, one guy who edited wedding videos. I still delivered groceries in the evenings. I still took odd graphic design gigs, and I still heard my dad say, "Are you ever going to get a job with a 401k?" But LoopNest grew, slowly then, not slowly. A YouTuber mentioned us. A small business newsletter featured us. More people signed up. We added features, hired a tiny team, brought in an accountant. A local fintech blog wrote about the app built by a Denver girl in a hoodie. My mom never read that article. She doesn't follow that kind of thing. Somewhere in the middle of all of this, my family started having little emergencies. Ethan's boutique gym in Dallas got hit by a burst pipe one winter, flooding the front studio. Insurance covered some of it, but not all, and he had a balloon payment on a loan coming up. He called me one night half drunk, complaining that small businesses were impossible and he might have to close the whole thing. Sophia, the star lawyer in Lowe's Angels, had taken on a huge civil rights case that ate up her time and money. She racked up legal costs on her own card before the firm reimbursed her. Had a nanny to pay, rent on a very nice apartment, student loans still gnawing at her every month. My parents, Evelyn and Richard, were quietly drowning in their mortgage and medical bills, pretending everything was fine. Even when Mom started cutting coupons again, and Dad pretended he liked staying home more because gas was expensive. Aunt Carla's catering business was just starting to recover from the pandemic, barely staying afloat after events were canceled for almost a year. To the rest of the world, they were all doing great. To me, with access to the numbers they shared in late-night phone calls, they were held together by duct tape and denial. That's where LoopNest came in. One night, staring at all the features we'd built for strangers, I added new rules for my own accounts. Extra income from my biggest contracts. It didn't go to clothes or vacations. It went to Family Safety Net, a folder inside Loop Nest that split into 4 sub-accounts. Ethan's gym debt, Sophia's credit and nanny costs, my parents' mortgage and utilities, Aunt Carla's business loan. Using the same tools my users had, I created automated payments from my personal account straight to whatever bills were screaming the loudest. I didn't tell anyone. Not because I was some kind of martyr, but because I knew exactly how it would go if I did. They would politely thank me at first. Then they would expect it. Then they would rewrite the story in their heads so that my help became a background detail and their hard work stayed front and center. So instead, I let the app do the talking. I set a rule to cover shortfalls in Ethan's gym lease if his revenue dipped below a certain line. I paid down part of Sophia's high-interest card every month so her balance stopped climbing. I made sure my parents' mortgage never hit more than 30 days late, pushing payments through right before penalties kicked in. I sent small but steady amounts toward Aunt Carla's loan so the bank would back off. Over 5 years, those little emergency boosts added up. About $360,000 worth of little money I could have used to buy a house, to travel, to give myself the stability my parents never thought I could create. I tracked every cent in Loop Nest. Every time I watched a red bar turn yellow or green because of my transfers, I felt this twisted mixture of pride and shame. Pride because I had built something powerful enough to actually change people's lives. Shame because I was using that power on people who still called me a failure in public. When Mom stood in Aspen and called me basically a beggar, she did it in a jacket she'd bought on a credit card that hadn't been sent to collections, yet because of a payment I'd scheduled behind the scenes. When Ethan went back to bragging about bouncing back after a flood, his rebound was literally paid for by the girl he said was allergic to stability. When Sophia ordered another glass of wine without thinking about it, it was on a card whose interest I'd been quietly killing for months. Standing in my apartment after that trip, I opened my laptop, logged into Loop Nest, and pulled up the Family Safety Net dashboard. 4 columns, 4 names, a total that made my stomach twist. My finger hovered over the rules I'd written. Auto transfer every Friday. Cover late fees automatically. Round up spare income and apply to their balances. My chest hurt, not from anger this time, but from this bone-deep exhaustion. I had been their invisible safety net for years, and in return they still saw me as a joke. I thought about my grandma's voice about stepping out of their shadows. Then, very calmly, I started turning things off. One by one, I disabled the rules. I canceled future transfers. I reset my own thresholds so extra money would finally stay in my account instead of bleeding into theirs. I didn't delete any records. I didn't touch their login. I didn't hack anything. I just removed myself from the equation. Loop Nest pinged a quiet confirmation sound each time I hit save. To anyone else, it would have been nothing. To me, it was the loudest click I'd ever heard. It was the sound of a rope being cut. Somewhere down the line, bills would come due. And for the first time in years, I wouldn't be there to silently pay them. They wanted to call me a beggar. Fine. Let's see how their perfect lives hold up without the beggar's money propping them up. The first alert came the very next week, early on a Thursday morning when the sky over Denver was still that gray-blue color that makes you feel like the day hasn't decided to start yet. My phone buzzed on the nightstand at 6:02 a.m. I almost ignored it, assuming it was one of my clients in another time zone, but the preview on the lock screen made my stomach tighten. Mom, my card just got declined at Starbucks. Is there something wrong with the bank? I stared at the message for a long time. For years, every time her balance dipped too low, Loop Nest would quietly send enough to cover the gap before the decline ever happened. Now, with those rules gone, reality was finally catching up. I put the phone face down and went to brush my teeth. By 7:15 a.m., there were 3 more messages and a missed call. Mom was spiraling. The app keeps saying insufficient funds. We just got a notice about the mortgage being late again. I thought this was all on autopay. My chest pinched a little at that word, autopay. As if the universe itself had been taking care of them, not their youngest daughter sitting in a cramped office at midnight moving sliders back and forth to make sure their lives stayed in the green. At 8:06 a.m., Dad's name flashed on my screen. I let it ring out the first time. The second time, I picked up and held the phone to my ear without saying anything. "Harper." His voice snapped, breathless like he'd just come in from outside. "Do you have any idea what's going on with the investments?" "The account is saying our funds transfer didn't go through this month. The guy from the bank said we're in some kind of review. What did you do?" I closed my eyes and leaned my head back against the wall. There it was, the assumption that if something was wrong, I had broken it. Not the years of them borrowing against the future, refinancing, taking on more than they could realistically pay back. "I didn't do anything," I said evenly. "Did you pay your bills with your own money?" There was a quiet beat on the line. I could almost hear his brain trying to spin that sentence into something he could understand without admitting what it really meant. "Don't be smart with me," he shot back. "We've never had problems like this before." All of a sudden, the mortgage is flagged. The credit card payment bounced. The retirement account is frozen for risk assessment. That doesn't just happen out of nowhere. I remembered clicking those disable rule buttons one after another until the family safety net dashboard went still. "It didn't happen out of nowhere," I said. "It happened from right here in my apartment with my own hand." "Maybe you should ask your bank," I said. "You're the one who's always in control, remember?" Before he could answer, I hung up. My hands were shaking, but underneath the tremor was something sharper. Relief. For the first time, the weight around my neck wasn't the necklace. It was the debt I had never signed up for. By 10:30 a.m., my phone was a small storm of notifications. A screenshot from Sophia of a bank email, subject line, "Account under review," her text underneath. "My accounts are being temporarily frozen until I clear an outstanding balance. This is insane. I had everything scheduled. Did you mess with anything when you stayed here last?" There was another message right after it. "If this is some kind of punishment for the other night, this isn't funny. I have court this week. I can't have my cards bouncing." For a few seconds, anger bubbled so hot it felt like static in my ears. Punishment. Funny. As if I had hacked into her life just to inconvenience her week, instead of spending 5 years quietly steering her away from financial disaster. As if she hadn't sat in Aspen and let Mom label me a beggar while she watched from her pedestal. I typed out 3 responses and deleted all of them. Finally, I settled on nothing at all. Silence felt more accurate than any paragraph I could send. At 11:30 a.m., a voicemail came in from Mom. Her voice was nothing like the bright, performative hostess at the resort. It was smaller, cracked at the edges. "Harper, honey, please call me back. The mortgage company called again. They said if we don't make a full payment this week, they'll start the foreclosure process. Your father's retirement account is locked until we settle some past due amount. Sophia says her cards are being reviewed. Ethan is saying something about the gym lease. I don't understand what's happening. Please don't do this. Whatever this is, we know we were wrong at dinner, okay? We were just joking. Please, where are you?" I listened to it twice, once with my heart, once with my head. My heart heard my mom, scared and confused, realizing maybe for the first time that the ground under her feet was not as solid as she thought. My head heard years of minimized apologies, of we were just joking, of me being asked to swallow hurt so things could go back to normal. Normal meant I paid the price so they didn't have to. I replayed Aspen in my mind. The champagne, the laughter, my dad's voice saying I was lucky they hadn't kicked me out. Lucky. I thought about every bill I'd paid while they rolled their eyes at my gig jobs. Every time I'd chosen their stability over mine. I pressed my thumb against the back of my phone, feeling the heat of the screen. Then I hit record and kept my voice calm. "Who are you?" I said. "Do I know you? Why should I help?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. I just sent the message and set the phone down next to my keyboard. My hands were steady now. Outside, the sun was finally up, catching on the snow still clinging to the edges of the sidewalks. I grabbed my running shoes and my grandmother's necklace, looping the chain around my fingers as I laced up on the trail. My footsteps thudded in time with a thought I couldn't shake. For years, they had treated my life like a joke and my exhaustion like laziness. Now the joke had stopped paying their bills. Actions have consequences. For the first time, those consequences weren't landing on me. I thought the messages would slow down after that, but they didn't. They multiplied. By Friday afternoon, my phone looked like a fire alarm. Missed calls from Mom, Dad, Sophia, even Ethan, which almost never happens unless he wants something. I muted the family group chat after Mom sent a long paragraph about misunderstandings, and we didn't mean it like that. And then immediately followed it with, "Also, do you know why the electric bill bounced this month? The company said the account used to be in good standing." Used to be. That phrase hit me harder than I expected. On Saturday, I was in the parking lot of a grocery store dropping off an order when my phone buzzed with a notification from the building's front camera. Mom and Dad were standing outside my apartment door, bundled in coats. My dad knocking like he had every right to be there. My mom glancing around the hallway like someone might see her and ask what went wrong. They had flown in from Sacramento without telling me. For a second, watching them on my screen, the old guilt tugged at me. That little voice that says, "They're your parents. Let them in, fix it." Then I remembered Mom standing in front of a room of people calling me a beggar with a smile. I remembered Dad saying I was lucky they hadn't kicked me out. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and drove to my next delivery. Later, I played the audio from the intercom. "She's not answering," Mom whispered. "What if something happened to her?" Dad muttered. "Nothing happened to her, she's just being dramatic. She probably did something with the accounts, and now she's hiding." The idea that I was some reckless hacker breaking things for attention would have been funny if it weren't coming from the same man whose mortgage I'd been saving for years. That night, I was at my usual coffee shop, headphones on, working through a client's onboarding flow, when someone knocked on my table. I looked up and saw Sophia and my dad standing there, two sharply dressed for the mismatched chairs and chipped mugs around us. My stomach dropped. I hadn't told them where I worked. Mom must have dug through old emails, found an invoice, tracked the address. Of course she had. "Can we sit?" Sophia asked. She didn't wait for an answer. They both slid into the chairs across from me like this was a scheduled meeting. "You look busy," my dad said, glancing at my open laptop. The LoopNest dashboard was up, but I quickly tabbed to a generic wireframe. "Freelance stuff," I said. "You know, the unstable life of a beggar." Sophia flinched a little at that, eyes dropping for half a second before she straightened her spine again. "We need to talk about what's happening," she said. "The timing is suspicious." I took a sip of my now-cold coffee. "What timing?" Dad leaned forward. "Your mother's card being declined, the foreclosure warning, the sudden issues with my retirement account, Sophia's accounts being frozen. Carla just called and said her business line of credit is under review, too. It all started right after you stormed out in Aspen." That is one hell of a coincidence. There it was again, the assumption that my anger was the problem, not their entire way of treating me. "You think I'm sitting here in Denver hacking every bank in America?" I asked. "I barely get my own groceries delivered on time." Sophia exhaled sharply. "No one said hacking, but you've always been good with tech. You're the only one who understands all those payment apps. You stayed with me in LA, you helped me set up some stuff. Maybe you changed something you shouldn't have. Maybe you're angry and you're using whatever access you have to teach us a lesson." Her tone tried to sound legal, objective, but underneath it, I heard something new. Fear. She wasn't used to being on the side of the table where she didn't have all the information. "I don't have access to your accounts," I said. "I never did. If your life is spinning because a few automatic transfers stopped, maybe the issue isn't me. Maybe it's that you've been living on money you never knew was there." Dad frowned. "What does that mean?" I looked at him, really looked at him. The lines in his forehead were deeper, his eyes more tired than I remembered. For a second, I almost softened. Then I thought about how easily he had humiliated me in front of everyone, how quickly he defaulted to believing I was the one who broke something. "It means you should probably call your financial institutions," I said. "Ask them who's been making sure your lights stay on." Dad slammed his palm lightly on the table enough to rattle my cup. "You don't get to talk in riddles. Harper, we are your family." I felt the necklace under my shirt, the small pendant resting against my skin. Family. The word that had been used to excuse every dig, every joke at my expense. Every time they brushed off my hurt because we're just teasing. That's what families do. I packed my laptop slowly, slid it into my backpack, and stood up. I have a meeting, I said. If you really want answers, you're not going to get them by ambushing me in coffee shops and accusing me of crimes. Then how? Sophia demanded, her voice cracked on the last word. It was the closest thing to vulnerability I had heard from her in years. I paused, thinking. For once, I had leverage. Not the kind you wave around to hurt people, but the kind that forces them to finally see you, to listen. Thursday, I said, 7 p.m. At this same place. Bring Mom, bring Ethan, bring whoever else thinks I ruined their life. If you want to understand what's going on, everyone needs to be in the same room, and you need to actually shut up long enough to hear me. Dad narrowed his eyes. Why Thursday? Because I said so, I replied. You've been running my life on your schedule for 28 years. You can clear one evening for me. For once, neither of them had a quick comeback. Sophia glanced at Dad, then back at me. Fine, she said. We'll be here. They left, the bell over the coffee shop door jingling as it swung shut behind them. I sat back down, heart pounding, hands shaking just a little. A few minutes later, my phone lit up with a notification. A text from my nephew, Owen. Hey, Aunt Harper, Mom and Grandpa are freaking out. They said they saw you. I just wanted to say I didn't think the joke at Thanksgiving was funny. I thought it sucked. Also, I've been using your app with some friends. It's actually brilliant. If you ever have time, could you maybe teach me some stuff about coding? I stared at the word brilliant until my eyes blurred. Someone in this family saw me. Someone who wasn't asking for money, just for knowledge. I typed back, sure, we can start after I deal with some things this week. And for the first time since Aspen, I felt something other than anger or exhaustion. I felt focused. They wanted to know what had happened to their perfect, stable lives. On Thursday at 7 p.m. in a cramped Denver coffee shop that smelled like burnt espresso and vanilla syrup, I was finally going to show them. Thursday at 7, the coffee shop felt smaller than usual, like the walls had leaned in to listen. I got there early, took the table in the corner near the back, and watched the door while pretending to rearrange screens on my laptop. Caleb sat a few tables away with his own computer, headphones around his neck, pretending to work, but obviously on standby. We had talked the night before, going over every detail, every payment, every contract, making sure we were covered. The bell over the door jingled at 7:02. My parents walked in first, stiff and tense, followed by Sophia in a dark blazer like she had come straight from court. Ethan in a gym hoodie, Carla right behind him, and Aunt Carla wringing her hands in the back. Owen slipped in last, looking nervous, his eyes finding mine, and then darting away when his mom glanced at him. They all crowded around my table like a jury. For a second, no one said anything. Then my mom broke the silence. Harper, she said, forcing a smile that did not reach her eyes. Thank you for meeting with us. We just want to understand what is going on. The bank, the bills, your message. Her voice trailed off on the memory of my voicemail. My dad did not bother with soft. Cut to the chase, he snapped. Did you mess with our accounts or not? I looked at each of them one by one, the people I had been breaking myself to protect. No, I said, I did not touch your accounts. I did not log into your banking. I did not hack anything. All I did was stop using my money to prop up a life you could not afford. Confusion rippled around the table. Sophia frowned. What are you talking about? Your money? You don't have that kind of money. You're always saying you're broke. I say I'm broke, I answered, because after paying my own rent, my own bills, my own business expenses, I sent almost everything extra to you. I turned my laptop around so they could see the dashboard on the screen. Loop Nest. My colors, my layout, my name in the profile corner. 4 columns labeled with their names, years of transactions laid out in clean lines and graphs. This, I said quietly, is where your emergencies went to be fixed. For a long moment, all they did was stare. Ethan leaned closer, squinting. Wait, he said slowly. Is that my gym lease number? Why is that in your app? Because when your revenue dipped after the flood, I said, I set up an automatic rule so that whenever your account dropped below a certain line, my income covered the difference on your lease and your equipment payments. Otherwise, you would have defaulted 2 winters ago. Carla clapped a hand over her mouth. That is not possible. Sophia blurted out. Mom and Dad helped him, not you. Mom and Dad were barely holding their own mortgage together, I said. Check the dates. Every time you thought a miracle payment came through, it was not a miracle. It was me. I clicked to the next column, her name. A list of credit card payments, nanny invoices, court filing fees that had been topped up at the last second, keeping her balances from going into full crisis. I have been using my app to route my own money into your messes for years. Ethan's gym, your cards, Mom and Dad's house, Aunt Carla's loan. Every time you said something like, "We got lucky," the bank gave us a grace period. That grace period had my name on it, you just didn't know. Aunt Carla made a small sound like someone had knocked the wind out of her. My mom's face crumpled. My dad went very still. Sophia stared at the screen, her cheeks flushing. Why? She finally whispered. Why would you do that and not tell anyone? I shrugged, feeling more tired than dramatic. Because I knew exactly how it would go if I did. At first, you would be grateful. Then you would start to expect it. Then you would rewrite it in your head so that my help was just background noise and your hustle was the main soundtrack. And the whole time you would still sit around tables making jokes about how I'm the one who cannot get my life together. Ethan scoffed, but there was no real conviction in it. This is insane. Even if you helped sometimes, you don't just get to yank it away and watch everything crash. That is messed up. I met his eyes. You mean I don't have to keep paying your bills forever so you can keep pretending you built your empire alone? He looked away first. Sophia swallowed hard. And this app, LoopNest, you built this? No, I said. I didn't build it. I co-founded it. I tilted my head toward Caleb. He's the other brain. Hi. Caleb gave them a small, polite wave, sliding his headphones fully off. We have accountants, lawyers, investors. All of them know exactly where the money came from. We have records of every transfer, every deposit. It's all above board. No one touched your accounts. We just created an automated safety net that you didn't know you were standing on. My dad's eyes narrowed. You're telling me you've been throwing money at us instead of building a future for yourself. That is irresponsible, Harper. That is not how you become successful. I almost laughed. I'm already successful, I said, and for the first time, I let the words feel real in my own mouth. You just never bothered to look closely enough to see it. For a moment, there was nothing but the hiss of the espresso machine behind us. Then Sophia straightened, slipping into her lawyer voice. Regardless of your intentions, there is a serious issue here. You used financial information we shared with you to create this system. That is data. That is access. We've spoken to someone, and there is an argument to be made that you built this company on our backs, that we are entitled to a share, maybe a controlling share. That was it. There was the twist. They had come here not just scared, but armed. They had already decided somewhere between the mortgage notices and the declined cards that my work belonged to them. You spoke to a lawyer, I repeated slowly, about suing me, the Beggar daughter. My mom gasped. Sophia, she started. You said you were just going to get advice, not actually, Sophia cut her off. I said I would explore our options. Harper is using payments and financial tools that involved us. A court might see that as leverage. At minimum, you owe us equity. Caleb's eyes flashed, but his voice stayed calm. Just so we're clear, he said, you're suggesting that the person who has been secretly paying your bills for years should now give you part of the company that made that possible because you feel entitled to it. My dad bristled. We're not saying entitled. We're saying this is a family effort. We trusted her with our information. She built something on top of that. I leaned back in my chair, suddenly very done with pretending this conversation was reasonable. You didn't trust me, I said. You pitied me. You tolerated me sleeping on your couch. You told anyone who would listen that I couldn't commit to anything. You laughed about my so-called side hustles while I sat there and quietly rerouted my paychecks to keep you from collapsing. The only time you even thought about ownership was when the money stopped coming. Sophia opened her mouth, but Caleb spoke first. You're a little late on the equity conversation anyway, he said, glancing at me for permission. I nodded. We signed a term sheet last month. A fund out of San Francisco is buying a majority stake in LoopNest. Due diligence is almost done. Their legal team has gone through every cent. They know exactly how much of Harper's personal income went to patching up your finances. If you file anything claiming you had some kind of right to the company, you're not going to get a payout. You're going to get letters asking why you think you deserve to profit from money you didn't earn. Silence slammed over the table. Ethan's mouth fell open. Aunt Carla whispered something in Spanish under her breath. My mom stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. Sophia looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. You sold the company, she said quietly. You did all this, and you never told us. I felt the pendant of my grandmother's necklace press against my collarbone when I nodded. It's my company, my work, my risk. I told the people who supported me, Caleb, my team, my friends here, the people who didn't roll their eyes every time I said I was building something. You had years to take me seriously. You chose not to. Ethan's voice came out sharp and ugly. So what? This is your revenge. Let us drown while you cash out and play the victim online. I met his stare without flinching. This is me stepping out of the way of the consequences you created. You borrowed more than you could pay back. You spent like the money would always magically show up. I was the magic. I turned it off. Owen finally spoke up, his voice small but clear. You guys, he said, looking around the table. I have been using Loop Nest with my friends. We all love it. She did something real. You cannot just act like she owes you because you are embarrassed now. Sophia shot him a warning look, but he did not back down. For a moment, nobody seemed to know what to say. The power dynamic had shifted so far it was almost unrecognizable. My dad, who always had the last word, sat there with his jaw clenched, no words coming. My mom's eyes were glossy, guilt and fear warring on her face. Aunt Carla looked ashamed. Ethan looked furious. Sophia looked calculating, the way people do when they are realizing their usual tricks will not work. I closed my laptop and wrapped both hands around my coffee cup, grounding myself in its warmth. Here is what is going to happen next, I said. Nothing for a while. The transfers are off and they're staying off. I'm not going to jail. You're not going to magically get a piece of a company you never believed in. You're going to go home and deal with your banks like every other adult in this country. I stood up. If any of you want to talk again after that, really talk, not yell or accuse or treat me like a walking ATM, we can set up a time in my office on my terms. Until then, we are done. I started to walk away, and behind me I heard my mom's voice break. Harper, please, she said. We are your family. I touched my necklace, the metal cool under my fingertips, and kept walking. For years, family had meant I was the one who had to bend, to swallow, to pay. Maybe it was time for family to mean something else, or nothing at all. The following Monday, I met them in a place they had never bothered to picture when they thought about my life. The Loop Nest office in downtown Denver. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a row of mismatched plants someone's girlfriend had donated, whiteboards covered in diagrams and sticky notes, desks with second-hand chairs and expensive monitors. It wasn't some giant tech campus, but it was real. It was mine. I stood by the glass conference room as they filed in, out of place in their heavy coats and tight expressions. Mom and Dad sat together, shoulders touching like they were bracing for impact. Sophia took a chair closest to the door as if she might bolt if things went too far. Ethan leaned back, arms crossed, trying to act unbothered. Carla and Aunt Carla sat quietly, eyes everywhere, absorbing everything. Owen took a spot near the end of the table across from me. Notebook in front of him like he was here to learn, not to argue. I clicked a remote and a big screen lit up with charts and simple slides. Not the dramatic kind, just facts. This, I said, is what you never saw. Revenue graphs, a timeline of user growth, a list of features we had shipped, a screenshot of a tech article with my name in it, another with Caleb's, a calendar showing late nights and weekend sprints that they used to call wasting your 20s. Then, without raising my voice, I laid out the numbers that hurt. 4 folders sat on the table, each with a name: Ethan, Sophia, Mom and Dad, Aunt Carla. Inside were printed summaries of every transfer I had made for them. Dates, amounts, purposes, mortgage top-ups, card payments, lease coverage, late fees I had eaten so their accounts would not fall apart. Together, just over $360,000. No accusations, no theatrics, just math. The room went very quiet. My dad flipped through his folder, his hands trembling slightly. My mom's eyes filled as she traced a line item paying for a roof repair she had convinced herself the insurance company had randomly covered. Aunt Carla stared at the total at the bottom of her page like it was in another language. Ethan skimmed his quickly, jaw clenched, while Carla read every single line, tears gathering silently. Sophia went sheet by sheet, lawyer brain turning, realizing how much debt would have exploded without those payments. "This is not a guilt trip," I said before they could spin stories in their heads. "This is a record. This is what actually happened underneath the version you tell at dinner tables. I'm not showing you this so you will grovel. I'm showing you so we can finally talk about the same reality." Mom wiped her cheeks. "Why didn't you come to us?" She whispered, "If you were this successful, if you were doing all this, why did you let us talk about you that way?" I swallowed. The truth was ugly, but it was honest. "Because for a long time, I thought you were right," I said. "I thought if I just proved myself a little more, if I rescued you one more time, you would finally see me as something other than a disappointment. I thought if I took care of everything silently, that was the price of being loved. And you know what I got in return? Jokes, eye rolls, that speech in Aspen." Ethan looked up, eyes glossy with a mixture of anger and shame. "We didn't know," he said. "You never said anything." "You never asked," I replied. "You never wanted to know what my life actually looked like. You liked me small. You liked me desperate. It made you feel bigger." Sophia flinched like I had slapped her, but she did not argue. She knew it was true. She had watched me sleep on her couch and still call me lazy in front of her colleagues. Caleb stepped in then, not as my co-founder, but as the person who had watched this whole thing unfold. "Here is the legal side," he said gently. "Every dollar that went through this system for you came from Harper. Her income, her contracts, her equity. You did not fund this company. You did not sign anything. You did not sit in this office at midnight fixing bugs. You did not risk your credit or your sanity to get it off the ground. Harper did. There is no judge in the world who is going to look at these records and say you are entitled to what she built. There is no case, just hurt." For once, Sophia did not argue the law. She just stared at the table. I took a breath and pushed forward because this was the part that mattered. "I'm not here to offer you handouts," I said. "I'm not here to go back to the way things were. That is over. But I am also not interested in watching you implode if there is another way. So, here are your choices." I looked at Ethan first. "You can keep pretending the gym is one big comeback story until the bank takes it. Or you can sell part of it now, deal with your debt honestly, and maybe walk away with something. If you want help structuring that, I will lend you my time, not my money. We do it on paper with contracts. So, I'm not your invisible safety net anymore." His throat bobbed. He did not say yes, but he did not say no. To Sophia, I said, "You can keep living on the edge of every billing cycle, then blame me when it catches up, or you can sit down with a financial planner and stop treating your credit cards like magical free money. I will connect you with someone. You will pay them yourself, and if you ever joke about me being a beggar again, I will block your number." Mom winced at that, but she did not defend the joke. To my parents, I was softer and sharper at the same time. "You need to talk to a counselor," I said. "Not because you are bad people, because for years you measured worth in titles and trophies, and it made you blind. You can stay blind if you want. You can keep pretending this is all about one angry daughter who overreacted. Or you can sit in a room with someone neutral and start unlearning the idea that success only looks like a law degree and a business suit. I will not pay for that therapy, but if you go, if you do the work, I will consider showing up for holidays again in the future. Maybe." Aunt Carla shook her head, tears running down her face. "I am so sorry, Mija," she said. "I knew you were helping me. I just didn't know how much. I will pay you back even if it takes me the rest of my life. We can figure out a plan." I told her fair on the record, no secrets. Then I turned to the one person in the room who had not asked me for anything but time. "And you," I said to Owen, "if you still want to learn to code, I meant what I said. You can intern here after school. We will start with basics. You can sit in on product meetings. You can see what building something looks like before the world decides if it counts." His face lit up in a way that made the whole meeting worth it. "Yeah," he said. "I want that. I really want that." The room shifted then, just slightly. The anger did not disappear, the hurt did not magically dissolve, but something else entered: reality. The fantasy that I was a screw-up and they were the flawless success story was gone. In its place was a messier, truer picture. They were adults who had made bad financial choices and hid behind jokes. I was the kid they discounted who had built the thing that saved them and then chose to stop. When the meeting ended, there were no big group hugs, no sweeping movie moment. Mom hugged me too tightly at the door, crying into my shoulder, whispering that she was sorry over and over. I did not say it's okay, because it wasn't. I just said thank you for saying it and stepped back. Dad shook my hand, of all things, his grip firmer than his voice. I didn't know, he said, about any of this. You didn't want to know, I replied, not unkindly. There is a difference. Sophia lingered behind the others, folder tucked against her chest. If I go to therapy, she said quietly, if I fix this, if I stop doing what I've been doing, do you think we can ever be close? I thought about it, really thought. I think we can be honest, I said. Close comes after honesty, not the other way around. She nodded, eyes shining, and left. Ethan walked out without looking at me. But a week later, I got an email from him asking if I knew anyone who helped small business owners wind down without losing everything. That was his version of an apology. I took it. Months passed. The sale of Loop Nest went through. I signed the documents with my hands steady, my grandmother's necklace warm against my skin. I moved into a slightly bigger apartment, bought furniture that was not falling apart, and for the first time in my life, when I said I was tired, it was not because I was secretly carrying everyone else. It was just my own life, and that was enough. I did not go back for Thanksgiving that year. Instead, I went hiking in the snow outside Denver. My breath visible in the cold, my phone buzzing in my pocket with pictures from Owen of the Code. He was writing little screenshots of his first working projects. I smiled, turned my phone on silent, and kept walking. People like to say that family is everything, that you owe them endless loyalty, endless chances, endless forgiveness, no matter what they say or do. I used to believe that. I used to think that if I just endured the jokes and swallowed the hurt, one day they would see me. What I have learned is this: family is not a free pass to treat someone like a punchline. Love without respect is just control in a nicer outfit. You can care about people and still refuse to finance their denial. You can wish them well and still walk away from their table when the cost of sitting there is your self-worth. Cutting them off financially was not about revenge, even if it felt satisfying when their miracles stopped. It was about finally stepping out from under their shadows and letting cause and effect do what it always does. Actions have consequences. Mine was building something real. Theirs was never imagining that the person they called a beggar might be the one holding the net. Forgiveness, if it comes, will be on my timeline, not theirs. Maybe one day I will sit at that table again. Maybe I will not. But if I do, it will be because they have learned to see me clearly, not because they need another bailout. And if you are listening to this wondering whether you are cruel for wanting distance from people who call their cruelty jokes, let me tell you what I wish someone had told me years ago. You are not cruel for drawing a line. You are not ungrateful for wanting respect. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let the people who hurt you feel for the first time what life is like, without your constant, quiet support. If this story hit home for you, whether it's the sting of being underestimated, the sweet rush of quiet success, or the messy fallout of family expectations like this video, thank you for staying with me until the end. Also, please hit that subscribe button on the Revenge Mag right now so you never miss the next story that might feel like it was written just for you. Check the description below for links to other videos. There are more tales of underdogs turning the tables, family twists, and hard-won victories waiting for you. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you've got your own story of being written off, proving them wrong, or navigating that complicated sibling dynamic, share it below. I read every single comment, and I'll reply to all of them. Your stories matter, and sometimes seeing you're not alone is the most powerful part. See you in the next one. Take care of yourselves out there.